Hi, this is Amy Magyar from FromWithin Coaching. Today, we are unpacking CliftonStrengths empathy. This is an opportunity for you as the listener and the viewer to learn a little bit more about the Clifton strength of empathy, how it can be used professionally, personally. And today we have a guest, so I will make sure to do that introduction. But as always, my co-facilitator is Coach Augusta Goodcrawl. Hey, Augusta.
Good morning, Amy. Good morning.
And our guest appearance today, someone who has empathy, is Jane Taylor. And Jane Taylor is a part of the From Within family. She is one of our affiliates and is an incredible writer, but also utilizes strengths, Clifton strengths in not only the writing that she does, but helping people bring out some of the language that we need for those resumes, for their blogs, and all of the work that she does. So Jane, thanks for being a part of this.
Oh, it's great. It's fun to talk about strengths because it's empowering.
It is. It's so much
what
better
makes
than
us
talking
strong.
about weaknesses, right? Ugh.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Very
All right.
good.
So we're going to stick to tradition, at least for right now, which is I'm going to read the Clifton Strengths definition of empathy, which is people strong in the empathy theme can sense, excuse me, lie. This is what happens. People strong in the empathy theme can sense the feeling of other people by imagining themselves in others' lives or situations. And I'm going to be flexible. For some reason, I have a little something.
You like a glass of water?
Augusta, I'm going to mute myself and pass the mic to you so that I can cough. Will you define empathy in your words? And please be empathetic
Absolutely.
to my cough here. Excuse me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really this is such a great theme. I think I love reading about it. I love it when I have a client who's got empathy in one of their top fives. For me, I really look at it as it's the ability to be able to understand the feelings of others and not just understand them, but actually feel them. It's being able to really tune in and get a great sense to that emotional aspect of what another person might be experiencing, during any type of situation. And so I like to think of it, it's oftentimes similar to the theory of individualists, but for individualists, it's more like, I know you. You have that sense of knowing about somebody, but for empathy, it's really that being able to feel that emotional state that others are feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, beautifully said. Your language of tuning in goes to my definition, which is frequency.
Yeah.
I feel like people that have empathy are on the same frequency as
energetic.
as sort of what's coming at them, and they can read that frequency and feel it. So they are absolutely in tune. Is perfectly said. So that's how I would define it. Jane was somebody who has empathy, and I'm going to ask you after you define empathy, will you run down for the listeners and the viewers your other strengths so that they can see where it is in the ranking? But how would you define empathy if someone asked you?
Well, I think of empathy as fellow feeling, and I like the word fellow because it implies fellowship. So we're in this together.
Wow.
I'm sharing. I'm imagining what it feels like to be in your position, and in that imagination, I'm in fellowship with you. You know what I mean? Fellowship. So it's fellowship,
It's
fellow
beautiful.
feeling.
It's beautiful. I wrote down fellowship about 8 times just now. It was like, it is so interesting. It goes along with the tuning in and the frequency of the only way to be a part of a fellowship. It's really hard to hide in a fellowship, and it's also hard not to be interactive in a fellowship, right? It's sort of it's even stronger than a tribe. And so for someone that has empathy showing up in one's life, I mean, you get heard and felt supported in ways that I hope everybody has a chance to meet someone who has empathy high in their CliftonStrengths,
Mhm.
because you just feel so cared about, in a sense.
Oh,
That's
that's nice.
lack
Yeah.
of a better way of saying it. Jean, will you share where your rankings of your 5?
Empathy is my last in top 5, is number 5. I have positivity, connectedness, learner, intellection, and empathy.
Yeah.
And it's well, for me, it's a fun mix because number 1 is positivity. So it's like, I'm going to have a good time with it. But having empathy, it's interesting. When I took the Clifton Strength assessment, I think it's 2 years ago now, I was sure that empathy would be my top strength. So it was interesting that it was number 5, especially in concert with the other 4: positivity, connectedness, learner, intellection. And I think the way that empathy works, and am I jumping the gun here?
Please, you just
Okay.
go.
The way that empathy works in connection to my other top strengths is that in going back to fellowship, this fellowship I have with the person I'm working with, I also imagine in this fellow feeling thing that they have my same strengths: learner, intellection, connectedness, positivity. I imagine that they have them. So we have this connection. And if, for example, if someone doesn't have learner or intellection, they won't necessarily see the great qualities in themselves that I'm able to see.
Yes.
And with the empathy piece, I have to be patient with them coming to terms with how great they are.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, I, because I'm because of positivity and all my strengths, I assume that everyone else has these qualities, that the learner and intellection especially.
Right. Which we know they don't. Yes.
Yeah, and when they don't, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to wait for them to figure out that they have this too. So it's like, maybe positivity / stubbornness is my number 1 thing.
The
But
35th strength, stubbornness. The coach is going to reframe that to resiliency, right? Determination, something there.
yeah.
It's interesting because I think when we think about empathy, it often gets confused with the idea of sympathy.
Right.
And I want to just sort of bring up an idea up of where I see the differences, and love to hear from both of you, because what's interesting is that the times that I've worked with my clients, men and women, when they have empathy and their top 5, this is their reaction. 90% of the time they go, oh, I wish I didn't have that. And I'm like, oh my God, that is going to make you such an incredible leader and a connector.
Yeah.
And it's like super fuel. And yet for some reason, it can be considered a weakness. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, both professionally and personally. But right now I want to talk about the difference, because there is a difference. Sympathy for me is sort of having a deep understanding of what's happening for somebody, what they're going through, where empathy is actually the person, you, Jane, are actually experiencing what they're going through. It's a deeper, almost like a deeper understanding. And that can create an issue, right? Because if you're not realizing that you may be absorbing what's coming at you from their energy, that can be an issue for you, because you can take on what's happening for them. But you're in it. You're feeling it. And that goes both ways. Both if I said to you, oh my gosh, I would love some ice cream right now, I bet I can get your mouth to water, because you're like, I know how it feels to want ice cream, right? I mean, you're right there. So it's both the good and the bad feelings, right? Of sort of both of those. But for either one of you, please expand or challenge me on that sympathy versus empathy idea. Anything coming up?
Sure. I have sympathy. For me, implies a certain judgment. I'm sorry for you, so I'm superior. because I'm sympathetic. I understand.
Wow. Yeah.
And when it comes to empathy, there's a common ground. It gets back to fellowship again.
Common
We're
ground.
in this together, and there is no hierarchy of thought or emotion. It's just shared.
I love it.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jane, very much. I was just reflecting on sympathy and empathy. And as you know, I've recently lost my father. And I realized that in conversations with others where I might have been sympathetic to a loss of a family member, I truly hadn't experienced the feelings and the depth that they had gone through. So I was sympathetic, but now I feel like I can be empathetic. And I think for you, Jane, having this, as you know, we talk about our CliftonStrengths being very natural talents, things that just come with ease to us, that don't take energy for us to try to be like. That must be, you know, we talk about some of the pitfalls almost, or when you're a little high in your empathy. That's, to me, it's your feeling all the time, and it can be kind of an absorbing. How do you protect yourself, you know, if you are naturally able to feel the empathy for so many different situations possibly?
Yeah. The That's a great question. I don't think I'm able to put up a barrier. I'm not able to shield myself from that stuff. And so, well, that's not true. Let me back that up a little bit. One of the things I do to protect myself, for example, is I don't look at the news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll go through you know, sometimes I'm all in the news, but sometimes I'll go in a phase of like, okay, this is too much.
Yeah.
I got to turn it off. So, yeah, there has to be a little bit of sort of self-protection.
Absolutely.
Almost
Yeah.
like choosing. You know you are going to absorb. So be
Yeah.
careful of the environment that you put yourself in to absorb.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. You know, I think the other thing is one of the beautiful things about CliftonStrengths, they're designed to help you become aware.
Yeah.
So Jane, you probably, before you took this, you probably thought, you know, gosh, my empathy is so much higher, you know, where it was, but you knew you empathized. And I think one of the beauties of CliftonStrengths is it's about creating awareness for what comes natural, but then helping you understand that if you have empathy, if you have one of these strengths, is knowing that you can't stop being empathetic,
Right.
but that when you are in a situation where you can't prevent what's coming at you, is knowing that you're going to need time to process after and being gentle with yourself about what just came at you, right? So that's the whole idea. One of the things, as we're talking about this, it's during COVID, 2020. It's sort of the, you know, March 15th for the last 6 months, Groundhog Day here.
The Ides of March.
And I think one of the things that's been so interesting is where empathy kind of falls in. And I know Augusta's going to, you know, ask a couple questions about that right now, but I think for me, I had compassion fatigue, although empathy is not one of my top fives. Earlier in COVID, I was not aware of what was coming at me. And I was not aware of how much I was absorbing from people. And I didn't, on the backside, take care of myself. It took me a couple weeks to realize what was happening. Then once I could realize that I could still be there with people, but that I needed to put into process some of the things that I do as a coach before and after a session to kind of help me process what's coming at me. So now that we've sort of talked about COVID, Augusta, I know you've got a couple questions for Jane about empathy, especially right now.
Yeah, and you know, it does bode, like during this time, obviously with high, well, it's not just COVID now, but so many things happening with high emotionality. what are you seeing more of, or how are you seeing, how are you helping people in your coaching and your writing deal with the emotionality of this time? How is your strength helping you?
One of the acknowledgement is big, talking about how this is a difficult time and there's no getting around it. And you know, you'll see an article or a Facebook post or something about, during the pandemic, I lost 20 pounds and I learned 3 languages and I did this thing. And it's like, yeah, no, not everyone is doing that. And that's totally okay. And that people are dealing with this radical disruption in ways that are appropriate to themselves. And some people might learn 3 languages during the pandemic and lose 20 pounds. I don't know those people, but and they're not making sourdough bread, but that people are, well, some of writing resumes, for example, people are nervous about, people in the job search right now are nervous about getting a job. They're more practical. And so they don't necessarily want to be kind to themselves or even authentic to themselves. And so it's a question of, okay, I understand that you're interested in this, in possibly a career change, but is this really about you? Is this really about your strengths? So just having this understanding of the global trauma that we're in the middle of right now, and one of the definitions of trauma has to do with not knowing the end, not being able to see the end of the situation. And it's like, well, unless you're in New Zealand, you don't know what the end of this situation looks like. So, and New Zealand isn't accepting immigrants, unfortunately. So
We can't go.
Or visitors, right. Or anybody, right?
Yeah.
The thing I think is so powerful about empathy that you're bringing up is reminding us that who is the most important person to be empathetic to?
Exactly.
Right?
It's yourself. Right. Yeah.
Yourself.
Yep.
And yet often, we talked about this before we started recording this, how often those with empathy, we are often the last to be empathetic towards ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely true.
The other thing that I want to bring up, because this, empathy is both a very powerful for leaders, powerful for parents, powerful for being in a partnership, however your empathy is showing up. One of the things that I wrote down when I was sort of going back through empathy is this belief for me that the true work for folks with strong empathy is to feel without owning. Not taking responsibility for another's experiences. So as a leader, if you have strong empathy, my God, you are, you're the unicorn. Like, I want to go work for you. But I also, as someone who maybe has you as the leader, I don't want you to own what's happening for me. That's mine, right? There's my individualization popping up. But I want you to feel it, but you don't have to own it. And in fact, I don't want you to own it because I want you to stay high above what's happening so that you can help me process it. Because sometimes when you're so much in the feeling and owning it too, it's hard to process. And I need you to help me process. So it's just my challenge to leaders out there, but also parents or partners of somebody with empathy is feeling is amazing, but not owning what's happening. And
I think that,
because that'll lead to maybe some overfunctioning where maybe you sort of take on their problem.
Yeah. Well, I think I love how you said that, Amy. I do think that goes back, and Jane, I'm wondering if you think this also, but the ability to be in that fellowship, because it's that ability to feel, but not take on when you've developed it and when you've boundaried it in a way that is mature for you. But I really sense that fellowship in that. It creates such trust that you can feel that empathetic strength in you can feel what others are feeling and allow them and help them find what they need to find, whether it's connection to others or to a connection to a project even. But in that fellowship type of relationship, I think that's what it creates, and that beautiful trust and that deep relational ability.
Mm-hmm. And it's also it's an aspect, especially in terms of leadership, it's an aspect of emotional intelligence that
Mm-hmm.
you can have this fellow feeling without taking on ownership and
Exactly.
still being the leader.
Exactly.
But oh, I know how that feels. Oh yeah, I totally got that.
Yeah.
And it just gives you more information. It's I often call it actionable data. So now
Ooh, right?
you've got some information to work with.
And to that point, it is about perspective. So often as human beings, we struggle with what's happening for someone else. And that's not I'm not saying everybody has that. I'm not saying, but we as human beings, often what scans through our head is, how does this affect me? How does this affect me? Whatever's coming at us. And that's just normal, because that's actually, very primal to keep us safe. But what I find with people with empathy is the perspective that they can offer us, because they're able to see what's happening for somebody that we maybe aren't able to see. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the beauty of that, right? So that's actionable data is coming from perspective awareness. Wow. So even if you're feeling, someone with empathy, what's happening for somebody else, and you completely disagree,
Mm-hmm.
you're still feeling their passion, even if what they are passionate about is 100% different. And I can only imagine, Jane, right now, that maybe can be a challenge, because you're seeing people that are so passionate about their beliefs. And even though you're not passionate about their beliefs, you're seeing the intensity, and it almost maybe makes you more intense for what's happening for you. But you do walk that fine line of being able to say, I get it. I get it. I may not agree, but
Mm-hmm.
I understand why you're worked out.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then when there's too much of that, I understand. And, then you have to step away, because it's like, okay, time to take the dog for a walk.
Self-care, right? I
Training.
think there is something, the theme of empathy is we are caring so much for what's happening for others, but self-care. So to your point, needing to walk away, needing to process on your time, all those things are super important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow.
I was thinking this morning about when empathy is dialed up too high, and thinking about how that works in terms of some of my projects with clients, is that, well, let's say, for example, I'm writing website content for someone, and that person is struggling because of the pandemic or because of something personal that's happening. And I end up, because I'm empathetic, I understand what that means, I end up giving them too much space. And I get it. Okay. And then things just fall off the cliff. It's like we had this momentum going and we were doing these great things together, developing this content, and now boom. And so giving people too much space, being too understanding, can sort of soften it's sort of the flat tire of progress. It's like, we were just going so well, and now
if I might, it's not just about I think what's coming up for me is this idea that part of being empathetic is understanding what's happening for them, but that they don't want to be there. And that the best things that we can do is actually create some gentle challenges to that. It doesn't always have to be that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I hear from you is, good luck, clients that work with Jane. She is going to acknowledge what you're feeling, allow you to feel, but not probably allow you to stay in that place for very long, because it may not actually be productive.
Well, as long as it's productive, it's like, if we have a project and we're working together, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And so it's empathy is an important aspect of our work together, certainly, but it's not going to be the greatest part of our work together. It's just going to inform our work together.
There it is. There it is.
Yeah.
I love it. Being mindful of the time and knowing that we probably could talk about this for the next hour or so, I want to give you both a chance to sort of wrap up and share a little bit about either something that you want to make sure the listeners and the viewers remember about empathy, or your own experiences with it or takeaways from today. So Augusta, I'll let you kick us off, and then Jane, you can bring us home.
Yeah, I just, reflecting on some of the clients I've had who've had empathy in their top 5, noticing that it is an absorbing strength. There's they have the ability to absorb these emotions and these feelings. And so I always am, challenging them to how do you counteract that sometimes, how it can be draining. So how do you feel yourself with the things that you need, or boundary yourself as they develop their awareness and their skills around their empathy, their strength of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
I think very much this is something that a couple of us talked about yesterday, actually, on one of our coaching community calls. Is I'm a believer that the environment always wins. And I don't just mean the physical environment, but it can be your mindset too, and the people that you're around you. If you have empathy and you know that you are strong in empathy, it's your top 5, be very aware of your environments. If you are around negative people, no. Now, in some cases, you may say, it's my family, I can't get away from them, because no judgment there. We all have negative Nancys in our family, and in our lives. But it's how will you counterbalance your time with negative Nancy with positive Polly, right? Or something like that, where it's if you have to be in a situation with a negative, what can you do for yourself so that you can absorb the positive? Is it a TED Talk, a podcast, playing with chickens, whatever it is, playing with your dog, all things that I know Jane does. So I just wanted to say that is to be really aware of how your environment is, what you're absorbing around your environment. And if you can't prevent the absorption, you can at least counter it with absorbing some fresher things that you want coming in.
Yeah.
Jane, take us home.
Well, it's choose the company you keep, choose your environment, and the empathy, maybe compassion, having some compassion for yourself, also has to do with self-awareness, knowing where it is in your life and your environment, not necessarily physically, but where it is that you feel creative, where you feel space to be able to figure stuff out. And for me, it's riding the motorcycle or kayaking. These are things that bring me clarity. I know that, okay, I need to go for a bike ride. Okay. Or sometimes I have great ideas in the shower. So it's like, okay, I'm going to put myself in a place where I can just let go and let the other things percolate that will create clarity for me.
I love it. I love it. Well, that's empathy, at least the 29-minute version of it between the 3 of us. This is not designed to be in lieu of working with a coach or with a partner and talking about your strengths, but this, I hope you have a chance to see how we all have different perspectives on empathy, but that for each of us, it may show up a little bit different. And so it's so important, if empathy is in the top 5 and you're finding that maybe it's dialed up a little bit high, is to work with a coach, work with Augusta or Jane, and help say, how do I use this as a superpower, and how do I prevent this from draining me? And so I hope that this was helpful for everybody listening in a little bit more about empathy, and that for those of you that do have empathy, be like Jane, be really proud of it. There's nothing to be embarrassed by, especially in 2020. We probably need more empathy than we need discipline right now. So with that being said, I'm going to sign off. Thank you again, Augusta. Thank you, Jane, for being a part of this. And we'll see you in another Clifton Strengths.